Today on Inside the Coach's Room, we're turning the clock back and we're going inside the 2020 bubble. Well, it's time to shake up the snow globe and head to Edmonton because it's time to go inside the bubble. And before we go inside the bubble, it's important, I think, to take us. You hear the word the bubble and what's the bubble and what's it like inside the bubble and you're in the bubble. Unless you've been in there, you don't know. Like you can hear about it and talk about it because all you did is watch those games on TV and go, "Oh, this is pretty cool." There's no fans, but what's it really like inside the bubble? So I thought, hey, I brought a camera. I was there. Let's show what it was like inside the bubble. But I think before we do that, I think it's important to know what was going on and what things looked like leading up to that and what was it like before the bubble. Because I don't know if you remember what that was like, but life was sure different. And this is March 9th. Coyotes just finishing up. Arizona Coyotes just lost to the Winnipeg Jets 4-2 in Winnipeg after finishing a Canadian road trip, coming home to play Vancouver. Still fighting and clawing in 11th place, trying to get back into the playoffs, and everything is fine. As a matter of fact, I went to a spring training game the next day. We had the day off after traveling. People everywhere watching, enjoying sports. Then changed, and things got different. Rudy Gobert diagnosed with COVID on March 11th, and things changed. And the world stopped, and the NHL went on hold. And we got a statement from the league and Gary Bettman saying the NHL is taking a hold to see what's going on. The Coyotes game on March 12th canceled. I was in the car driving at 3:30 in the afternoon, driving to Gila River Arena, trying to get there for the game that night against the Vancouver Canucks. And I get the call, and I look on my screen, and it's John Chayka. And I don't know if you get a call from your boss on the way to the arena, there's always that little level of concern of, the boss is calling. And it was John Chayka saying, don't come to the rink, turn around and go home. And you're like, seriously? Like, don't come? What are we supposed to do? And honestly, he said, I don't know. Just go home and we'll figure it out and we'll go from there. And so after that, everything stopped. And I don't know if you remember what it was like those early days when the store shelves were empty and everybody's going for their toilet paper. But for me, it was a time without hockey. And I got to do something I'd never done. I started a sunflower garden. Yes, I did. A sunflower garden. I had all this time off to build my garden. And I went from this to this in COVID and got some time away from the game. And one of the things we did, and I thought it was real fun, if people remember what that isolation was like back then, and you didn't go out and hang out, you couldn't go to the restaurant or the tavern, you sat at home over and over and over again. It got boring. And so what I did is I organized some Zoom calls where we still got to socialize. So every Wednesday night was social night with Coyote people. I got to see here it's Shane Doan, Antoine Vermette, Ray Whitney. We always had a special guest, Keith Yandel, join in. It was all of our staff just trying to stay sane as we were getting through COVID. And then you got to restart. Then we get the call that things are going again, and we're going to start playing hockey again. And that's hard. It was hard to make that transition back to restarting. We get a call from John Chayka, and we're back on. And then it was a Zoom call. And this time it's not a Zoom call with your buddies. Now it's with the medical personnel. Now it's with the doctors. Here's what's going to happen. Here's how the transition is going to occur. Here's what it's going to look like as this team tries to get back onto the ice. And I don't think people realize how hard this was to get going back again. And I don't mean physically hard, because they had a training camp schedule and there was the schedule on how everything's going to work. But back in that time, you couldn't have more than 5 people on the ice at the same time. So now you've got to organize groups of 5 or 6. It was a mess. But it also gave the opportunity for the Coyotes to get into a fresh start. And we organized the groups and trying to get everything organized and get the ice time organized in Group A, Group B, and who's coming, who's playing, who's not going to play. And there were a time, and Michael Grabner was one of them, that was like, gosh, he's got that eye injury that he had struggled with. He had just had a new child and wasn't sure if he was going to go. And there were players like that weren't sure if they were going to go back. But ultimately, everybody comes back. And I want to take you through something. Because if you don't remember or don't know what COVID was like and remember what COVID was like, I want to take you through this. Because this was the life of everybody on the Arizona Coyotes for over 30 days. This is the parking lot at the Mayo Clinic. And in the parking lot of the Mayo Clinic, you had to go get tested every single day. And if you're familiar with the Phoenix metro area, this is 30 plus minutes away from where the arena is. It didn't matter where you lived in the valley or where you had to go. Before you could go to the rink, you had to go here. And you had to get tested. And by the time you got to the rink, you were either showing positive or negative. If you were negative, you got to go into work. And if you weren't and you showed positive, they sent you out the door. And you think that like it was tight. It was tight at the door. The medical personnel were at the door. But the one thing I wanted to show here, because I think, and I know there's a lot of people now with tested COVID, and we talk about COVID and it's what it means to people, but I want you to see, this isn't the stay-at-home COVID test. And you can see here, they got two lines as they're going up to the tents. And what we would do is everybody's there at roughly the same time. Everybody's calling everybody. Everybody's calling, going, hey, how was line A? How was line B? And that guy was tough, man. Don't go to line B. Go to line B. Go to line A if you can. And why was it so important? I'm going to show you. This is what a COVID test at the Mayo Clinic looked like back in 2020. Now you can see this is as they go in, this is no ordinary Q-tip. And that's not going in a quarter of an inch. Dude, that is going to the back of your throat. So you wanted to get the guy, and I could just feel that now. And you wanted to get to the guy that wasn't going that deep into your nose. So yeah, we'd call ahead and, hey, gotta stay away from lane B. That guy is way too tough and very aggressive. So that was our day every day for 30 days. And you can see Rick Tocchet with Jay Verity, both on the Philadelphia Flyers staff now, trying to get back to work. You see Talk with the blue gloves, Jay with the blue gloves, and Talk had a hard time with the mask. I'm not talking out of school. This is hard. You're trying to get in the habit of wearing these masks all the time. And it was strict, man. Dude, it was strict by the league. And the medical personnel were on top of it. They just want to play hockey. And I'm not getting into the should you wear a mask, should you not wear a mask, did it help, didn't help. Not important. The league said wear them, and the league said you had to have gloves and a mask on if you wanted to work. So we did. And that's how things were. And this was our meeting room. And you had to have social distancing within the meeting room. And as you can see how many chairs you had X'd out, dude, we couldn't have meetings in the theater room. Just wasn't possible. You couldn't have your day-to-day meetings inside the theater room. So we had to move into where the VIP lounge was underneath the stadium, where the premier fans would go in the Lexus lounge. And this is Rick Tocchet with the mask on, with social distancing. And I know it's dark, but this is actually during a meeting. And you're trying to see how far apart the players had to sit in this environment. And this was every day. This was day-to-day life before we got to the bubble. And now you got to keep in mind too, you're a team that you've been, now you're going to end, you're in. And there are teams that didn't get in. They brought a lot of us to Edmonton for the bubble. So there are a lot of teams, but now you haven't played in months. You're out of shape. You've been sitting at home, and now you got to go not just compete, but you got to compete for a Stanley Cup. Like the preparation was tough and it was tight. And one of the things that we had to go through is an exercise that we had to go through was you had to come up with your bubble list. And this was the drama on a day-to-day basis, because you could have 52 people. 52 people were allowed to travel to the hub city. And you had to have certain people. Clearly, you had to have players, and they allowed you to take 31 players, because if a guy was injured, you wouldn't have time for him to clear quarantine. So you had 31 players. That doesn't leave many people to come on the trip. So there were people debating every day, do we need security? Do you need a team doctor? And then there were people for another time that got left off this list that probably should have been there, but they weren't. And you had to get 52 people, and 52 made the trip to the bubble. And everybody gets ready. We jump on the plane, and now it's time to go to the bubble. And I want to show you what the bubble means. What is the bubble? Like, what is the bubble? Like, they can't put a thing over the whole city of Edmonton, or can they? The NHL did a great job. And kudos and hats off to the NHL for actually getting this thing off the ground and running. Everybody, when we got to the bubble, you've got this return to play pamphlet that had all the information you could possibly need about the bubble. and it showed where the bubble actually exists. And everything in color is inside the bubble. And you're going, how can they separate city blocks? Well, you're going to see how they separated city blocks. You can see the Sutton Place Hotel was home to the bottom 4 teams that were fighting their way back in. The JW Marriott, the premier hotel there, because it was connected to the arena, that housed the top 8 teams. The Delta was all of the NHL officials and referees and everything else that made that thing tick, from marketing to TV people. Everything was at the Delta. So these were the 3 main hotels as you got in. But this is what it looked like when you rolled into the bubble. It's just a fence. It's a fence with a plastic sheeting. And this is us pulling up on the team bus, and they opened up the team bus and you walk in, and that is what the bubble looked like from the inside. And all it was just a series of gates, and it's like chutes and ladders where they had to block off areas of town. And the most difficult part you can see here on the left is going through intersections because they had to use fences. And this is the view at our hotel. This fence lined the entire streets of Edmonton. So on this side of the fence is the bubble. On the other side of the fence, you're outside the bubble, and daily life went on in Edmonton. Just to show you what the walk was like between the hotel and the arena, it was just, you were a little mouse inside a maze going back and forth to the arena. And you see people coming both ways. And the funny thing is, these are just players. Like, if you saw someone in the bubble, they're a player or a coach or somebody working for the league. Like, there were just no other people. And this is the funny thing and interesting, how you got through the intersection and how you had to cross the street in Edmonton. You can see the traffic going by, and you just waited for the lights to cross. And then they put up the gates across the traffic lanes. Traffic had to stop, and you walked across the street. And this is how you got around the bubble, until they shrunk the bubble when it got down to the semifinals. But this is the bubble. There's somebody outside the bubble just drinking her coffee on the way to work. And there we are inside the bubble with Johnny McLean and Phil Housley walking to the rink. And you can see in the middle, this is the walk back to the hotel. But that was what the bubble actually consisted of, which is a chain link fence that kept you from one area of Edmonton to the other. And the walk you had to make every single day was between the arena and the hotel. And this is the walk we had to do over and over and over. And again, we talk about going out the arena, and everybody you pass here, again, is part of what's going on inside the bubble. It was a real youth hockey tournament feel inside the bubble. And you can see here, everything going on, how long it took you to get one end to the other of the bubble till you were safely back home inside the Sutton Place Hotel. It was a long walk back and forth inside that bubble. And one day, it's hard to see, but rarely did it rain or we have any bad weather while we were inside the bubble in Edmonton. But you can see here, the wind blew up and blew part of the bubble over. And so we couldn't leave our hotel because the bubble had been breached and compromised. So we had to stay in the hotel until they were able to pull those fencings back up and get the bubble back intact. And this is the walk. This is the bubble. This is what it looked like from above, from our hotel room at the Sutton Place, and trying to get between there and the arena. And everywhere you went, there was inside the bubble, there were police officers making sure that no one breached the bubble and got into the bubble and maybe put stress on the bubble with what was going on. And there we are at night walking in and out of the bubble. But I want to talk about COVID just a minute. And I'm not talking about the disease. I just want to talk about how the league clamped down on what was going on with COVID. Because the league did an amazing job. As far as we knew, we might be wrong, but there was not one person that tested positive during this time. And that's people going in and out, running the arena and the restaurants and making everything click, and nothing ever happened inside the arena. And again, we talk about we'll go back to our booklet, the testing information and scheduling. You got tested every day inside the arena. The lobby, if you're familiar with the area inside Edmonton, the whole lobby was turned over into this large testing station. But everywhere else you look, there was hand sanitizers, and most importantly, there were temperature check stations. And when you talk about the temperature check stations, you can leave. Like, you can't leave the hotel. You can't leave the arena. You can't go from one building to the next until you cleared the temperature station. And so these temperature stations were at the door going out of every building you were in. And if you failed, you couldn't leave the building. So how do they keep track of that? Well, you'd have to stand in front of that, and you had an ID. And your ID was on your phone, and it showed who you were and had your information on it. And you had to show the QR symbol to the reader. It would read your temperature. And then you can see on the top of this, your light would be green. And once you were green, you could leave. If you were red, and dude, it happened, you're stuck. You can't leave. If you're in the arena, you can't leave the arena. If you're in the hotel, you can't leave the hotel. And you're stuck there till medical personnel can come and check you out and make sure that you are clear to leave. And who checks it? Yeah, there's security outside every single door of every single building, and you have to flash your phone to show that you are green. If you are green, you can go. And it's funny because a bunch of little kids that the players would just take a screenshot of their green picture showing that they were green, and that would be days old. And you would just flash your picture from your phone saying, "Oh, I'm green, I'm green, I'm green." Well, that took about 3 or 4 days for the league to catch up and change to a moving screen, so it had a moving background on the green, so you no longer could take those screenshots and get to where you were going. You had to actually show and get your temperature checked. Social distancing happened, and more importantly, testing. Here's the testing stations again in the lobby, and this is what testing looked like inside every single day. Everybody got tested for COVID every day, whether you were working a concession stand, you were a referee, you were a player, it didn't matter. You were getting tested every day. And this is what the lines alphabetically broken down, and we just waited in our lanes, and there's Corey Schwab peeking through to see if he got a good tester, because it's just like before, are you getting a good tester or not? And this is what the lobby looked like. It was just testers and people testing all day, every day, to get you back into the bubble and get you ready to go to your day's work. So here's the Blackhawks time of day. Everybody had their own particular time of day. So it was team after team after team. You had windows of an hour to get your testing done. So everybody got that until you were green, so you could be green for the day. And we're going to talk about the hotels, because this is where you lived. And especially the first few days, because in the first few days of the bubble, you couldn't intermingle with other teams. You couldn't. We shared a space feet away from the Chicago Blackhawks. Couldn't interact, because the first 5 days, everybody was in quarantine. So you had to work on your own. You could see the teams that were listed: 6 teams at the JW Marriott, 6 teams at the Sutton Place, and it all went on record. The top 6 were at the Marriott, the bottom 6 were at the Sutton Place. And this is where we lived. And you had these stations before you walked in and out. And we're going to get to the food in a little bit, but this is how you got in and out of the arena. And this was like the little cleaning table before you got in. And you were able to buy snacks inside the front lobby. They made a convenience store, which was incredibly important, because you just didn't have access to convenience stores. You couldn't just walk down the street to get yourself a candy bar. That kind of access just didn't exist. If they didn't have it in this little room, you couldn't get it. And this is the hotel lobby of the Sutton Place Hotel. And one thing I want to tell a story: this may or may not be the couch that Milan Lucic attempted to tackle in the lobby. But we'll get to some of those stories later. This is where the meal rooms are. When we talk about how close the Blackhawks and the Coyotes were, again, it went by your rankings, and these were the last 2 teams. This is Team 11 and Team 12. And you sat in the basement of the Sutton Place Hotel. We had a really small area. And so for our 5 days of quarantine, this is it. This is where the Arizona Coyotes lived, in this little space. And that was for everything. That wasn't just for meals. It was everything. But you could see the meals were protected by plexiglass, so the employees were separated from the staff. You could see it again, the employees with their masks in behind. And that's how you got your morning, lunch, and dinner every single day for the first 5 days. And there's everybody getting a chance to eat. Barrett Hayton heading up for more food. But we also did our meetings here. We had nowhere else to go. So it would be, you'd eat, you'd have your meals there, and everybody would sit in this space and getting prepared for the Nashville Predators. But you also watch TV. They had TV going 24 hours a day, and you could see that they had video games there. And we had signage saying, hey, this is ours. And that was, by the way, Dave Griffiths, travel guy, big hats off to him getting this stuff to hang up on these walls, because that was really, really hard. So we've got everything hung up on the walls to make it feel like home. But you can see the PS4 on the counter, so players could sit there and play video games. This was where guys lived for the first 5 days. You could sit, like, you played video games. This is where you worked out. Just a corner of the room was our weight room. That's it. That's the weight room in the National Hockey League during COVID in the bubble. That's it. You had a couple of dumbbells and a couple of medicine balls, and that's the gym for the first 5 days, because you didn't have access to anything. And everything happened in this room. And I got to go back to Sutton Place Hotel, which is no longer the Sutton Place Hotel in Edmonton. I just got to give a little shout out here, because you can see some of the things going on here. My window was broken, so I thought it was hot because the window was broken. There's the guy working on my air conditioner. Little did we know, the air conditioning was out on the entire side of the hotel at the Sutton Place Hotel. So anybody that stayed in this hotel that had the right side of the hallway, you didn't have air conditioning. So what did the league do? The league bought fans. And you had to go pick up your fans in the lobby. Now, And that buzzing noise, I tell you, how much sleep. It was so hot in those rooms. And that went on for a long time because, again, this is COVID. You can't get the parts. You can't get things to happen. So we were stuck with air conditioning. You had guys. It's funny because we talked about half of the hotels. So half of the players are fine because their side of the hallway is nice and cool. But the other half is boiling hot. And nothing you can do. It is what it is. Can't get the parts in because this is COVID and things aren't moving as well. So being stuck in a hot hotel for day upon day with really nowhere to go and nothing to do and no way to get away from it was stressful. But luckily for the Arizona Coyotes, and we won't get into the hockey yet, but they got to move on up to the JW Marriott. And I tell you what, so much nicer because you didn't have to walk the bubble anymore. You got to be in the JW Marriott. And this is the other hotel, and the proximity to the arena made this such a better place to stay. We're not talking about the rooms and so on. It's just a better place to stay. And when you watch the Edmonton Oilers during the playoffs and you saw the mosh pit, this is the mosh pit. The mosh pit is just outside the JW Marriott hotel window. That's from my window of the hotel. I could shoot down and take a picture on the left there of what it looked like down on the mosh pit. But this was the courtyard. This is the courtyard for everybody in the bubble. This is where the congregating happened. This is where everybody got to visit or eat. And this was a big deal for the people inside the bubble, was the mosh pit. And you see it crowded during the playoff games in Edmonton, but not so much so during the bubble. And you can see here, this is our breakfast station, again, overlooking the bubble. We had I got to say, they did treat us so well for breakfast, lunch, and dinner now. But this is what it looked like. And I want to show how many teams are crammed into this hotel. So when you walk into your floor, there's the Dallas Stars. And the Dallas Stars would have a meeting room and a meal room. And then, here's the Vegas Golden Knights. And that's their meeting room and meal room where they would play video games and eat and do whatever they want to do. There's the Calgary Flames, and this is their meeting room with all of their facilities put inside. And there we're getting close to the Colorado Avalanche. Everybody's in the same hallway. These are every team competing for a Stanley Cup, and their meeting room, their meal room, their place to hang out, watch video games, watch games, and work out is all on the same floor in the same area. And here is the Arizona Coyotes. And again, it was just that feel of, hey, we're in a youth hockey tournament. And you'd be sitting out in the hallway and all these other guys would be congregating. And this is the room we lived in. Once the Arizona Coyotes moved, you see John McClain working with somebody with video at the desk. But that's what it looked like once the team moved. And then you have to talk about food. Because food inside the bubble, and I'm going to go to what, no knock on the league, but never, it happened so fast and put it together so fast. This was in your packet. These are your dining options, but just fantastic. Look at all the food and all the options you're going to have inside the bubble. Well, first I said the first 5 days you couldn't go to these restaurants because you had to be locked in with your group. And so part of the things, this is the Tim Hortons. Like if you're in Canada, from Canada, around Canada, no Canada, this is the Tim Hortons truck packed every single day. Everybody wanted to get their Tim Hortons. There's equipment manager Tony Silva of the Coyotes getting his health food for the morning, getting his day started. And you can see the ice cream truck, the gelato truck, like these trucks were where you picked up your late night snacks. This is where you were able to get food. But I gotta say this though, league, sorry, there are a lot of promises of these food trucks moving in and out for the duration of the bubble that didn't really happen. The food truck offerings were limited, but they were great. Trust me, this was great. And again, there's the healthy eats because you got the players want to eat healthy, and you have street tacos there. So you did have the options, and then you got to get the bars open. Once the 5 days were up, this is the 99 bar inside of the arena. This is where you could go to get bar food. I mean, it's burgers, it's chicken wings, it's grab a cold beer while you're waiting in between games. And this is the place where you felt like a hockey tournament because you could just go to any single game and you'd stop in the 99 lounge. And here's a couple of travel guys from Bronco from Vegas and Griff from Arizona sitting and watching a game on TV. And there's the coaches out for dinner before a game. And then you could go down to the concession stand area. They had one concession stand open for Rogers Arena. So if you wanted a hot dog and you wanted to get a pretzel and go watch a game, you had that ability. Now, this was open all day. If there's something going on in the arena, and by the way, there was constantly throughout the day, this is open. So if you're in a hotel room, you just want a hot dog, dude, you can. So they had the option to get that for food, but you have to go to hotels. And inside the hotels, these restaurants with the lifeblood. This is where you felt normal for the first time. Because before this, when I was back in Arizona, we weren't going to the restaurants. You weren't going out to eat. You weren't sitting at the bar. So this got you as close to normal as you can possibly imagine. And that place is the Chop Steakhouse. I have to say, I spent so much time in the Chop Steakhouse because it was normalcy. This is inside the Sutton Place Hotel, and this is where the gathering point was. And this is the entire staff of the Coyotes getting ready. Lunch and dinner, we were right there so often. We're in this. They had the TVs going with the games from the Eastern Bubble. And this was just the congregating spot. But more interesting this is how busy this place was. And I don't know if you can see in the top left, you can see a little black table that says Chop on it. That was a DJ. So at night, they have a DJ playing music, and it turned almost into a little nightclub. But the funny thing is, every player and every table is full of players. Like, that's who was inside the bubble. This is the bubble. When you can see Milan Lucic talking to Rick Tocchet, and it's just wall-to-wall players from every team filling up these tables. It was such a different experience that it was normal. So inside the bubble, you could see Taylor Hall and Nick Schmaltz just sitting down and watching hockey, and you can see guys from other teams. Here's Tkachuk with some of the guys that he knew, with Clayton Keller and Christian Dvorak, and this was the normal thing inside Chop. That's where guys went to dinner. You went to watch the other games from the Eastern Bubble and the Western Bubble inside Chop, and you could see Phil Kessel and Milan Lucic hanging out and talking hockey. And this was where you rooted for the other teams. And it was interesting. I will say this, because the Edmonton came into this bubble and it was happening in Edmonton. Not a lot of Edmonton fans among the players in the National Hockey League at that time. So there's a lot of rooting against the Oilers as they're playing Chicago in round one. And I want to talk about one more thing in the bubble. These two were inseparable, Craig Berube and Rick Tocchet. And you could see them, if they had time, they were sitting together. And I will tell you this, if you know either of these two guys, they were talking hockey. And that's all they talked all the time. And it got opportunities for them to share ideas and just relive some of the good old days, I guess. But you see on the right, out in the middle of the mosh pit, if we couldn't find Rick Tocchet, you had to look for Craig Berube. Because if wherever Berube was, there was a very good chance you might find Rick Tocchet inside the bubble. And one more way to get food was, without the trucks and without the restaurants, you could DoorDash. But to DoorDash, you had to get somebody inside the bubble. So this is what that transfer looked like. You had to get the bubble, you had to get the driver to pass it off to a security guard. The security guard would take it to that table, and then you could finally get food from other places. So there was the ability to get things from outside the bubble as well. Well, now we got to talk about practice and preparation. We're there to play hockey, and this was it. This is a meeting room inside the Sutton Place Hotel where the coaches met. And I will say this, having this much time to prepare for one opponent is dangerous. Man, the Arizona Coyotes had weeks and weeks and weeks to plan and prepare for the Nashville Predators. And it was you beat this one to death. This was so much time working on one opponent, and you could see the schedules would go up every day. And this is kind of the way life was inside the bubble, getting ready. That would change constantly, by the way. But here's working on the plans on how you're going to beat Nashville. And we spent so much time in these little rooms thinking about it. But then you got to go to the practice arena. And this was the setup that the league had for the practice arena. Had 4 sheets of ice, and they did a phenomenal job. As the players, you could see there's Phil the Thrill getting in to go to practice. So we got to be a half hour. This is outside the bubble. You got to be a half hour bus ride outside the bubble to get to the rink. And it was so nice to get away from that bubble area. So you got to see some green trees and get yourself inside the arena. And that was awesome. I remember sitting outside this arena and just looking at green grass, and I was just thrilled. Now, the public wasn't allowed here. They did have the fence around this as well, but this was what it looked like going to practice. And again, it's Pee Wee's. There's the temperature station as you're walking, but this is Pee Wee's. There are 4 sheets of ice with 4 teams practicing, and everybody's going at the same time, and everybody's got their medical rooms right there. It's black curtains. That's your medical tent, and that was the Colorado Avalanche medical tent for that day. Every team was set up outside their practice rink, and you had your medical area in that area. There's Chicago's medical area and Dallas's medical area, and that's what it looked like inside the bubble. And you can see Christian Fischer getting ready for practice. There's Taylor Hall with his mask on, and again, we won't talk about masks. You had to. This was just the rules. If you didn't keep your mask on, comply. There's Derek Stepan getting ready to get on the ice. But this is what happened between every practice in the bubble. Every practice, they had a team come out and just clean up the benches and wipe everything down until the next team could go. And this was a common sight everywhere in the bubble. This is at the practice facility on the right, where you just saw teams, gear, and equipment everywhere, and it's just moving in and out to different areas. You're practicing on one rink today, the next rink the next day. It was a mess. I feel so bad for the equipment guys that had to deal with this every single day. And we talk about the one advantage that you got a little more room for weight rooms and working out at the practice facility than you did when you were stuck inside the hotel. So you did get an opportunity to get better upgraded facilities. This is at the practice facility. But now you've got to show one thing that happened. And all of these days and day after day after day after day inside the bubble. And one thing that they got in the Toronto bubble, they had access to parks and to a soccer field where they were able to get on the grass every day. But in Edmonton, they didn't. And it was day after day of the concrete jungle. And it was strange. And I know I'm not going to people feel sorry for the people inside the bubble, but it was hard. It was hard mentally. And it was a difficult thing to do because you didn't have that normal connection with people. And you definitely didn't have that normal connection with outside. So one day, the Arizona Coyotes got to see, this is what we could see from our hotel. You could see where the Edmonton Eskimos played football. And you could see it out the window. And you're like, oh my gosh, can't wait. We got to go and spend a day inside the Edmonton Eskimo football stadium. And I tell you what, again, hats off to the league for the way they operated this and the way they were able to make this all happen. Because when you get a chance to see, and you haven't been in seen grass, you haven't had an ability to run around, you haven't been outside and seen the sky and done all of these things for, at this point, it had been 3 weeks. This was amazing. Hats off to the league for getting this organized, because they had everything. You could play soccer. You could kick field goals. They had everything that you could imagine to make a day outside and just forget about the hockey. Forget about being stuck in these hotels and inside the arena day after day. You got the opportunity to get outside and play like little kids. And you can see there's Barrett Hayton kicking a field goal, and you can see everybody playing catch. You had the cornhole tournament. Like, there was so much going on that it just was amazing to get away from everything for one day. And you forgot how valuable that time outside was. The other centerpiece besides the hotel was the arena. And the arena, we talk about what Rogers Place had to put up with. This thing, again, it had 2 sheets of ice. It had the practice facility, but rarely did you get a practice inside that part of the building. This is how the league set everything up, and they had the schedule up in front every day. And I tell you what, again, hats off. This was amazing how well they shuffled this many people in and out of this building. We talked about the mosh pit before and what this became. This is where you watch games. You could go to the food truck, get your Tim Hortons coffee, and you could sit and watch the other games that were going on inside the building right now, or what was going on in the Eastern Bubble if there were no games on now. So people would just sit outside. The speakers were going. This was a great place to watch the games. And here we go. This is one of the earlier games with Calgary and Winnipeg, and you're sitting outside watching the games, and everybody sat out there and made this the social area in the mosh pit. And this was the central area of the arena. This is what the arena was about, was being outside in that area. And in the mosh pit, you could do other things too, just like we saw at the Edmonton Eskimos Stadium. You could play basketball. They had cornhole. They had the ability to burn some steam off outside. But they also had players' lounges. And I will say this, the players, the staff didn't have these areas. The players did. And what they were able to do inside the players' lounge, you had the golf. You could golf anywhere. Every team had the ability to get there and go golfing, and you could golf. These were set up all over throughout the concourses inside the arena at Rogers Arena, and that's how players were able to get away from the hockey and sit there and work on their golf game. This is what the lounge would look like for a team. They've got a sitting area. They've got cards. They've got big TVs to watch the games on. They've got video game sets. They've got so much going on to try to keep them busy and try to keep their mind off of being in the bubble. And you can see this as somebody, I tried to sneak this shot in of a player getting out there and working on his swing, but you get an idea of what was going on in the bubble. And then another thing is the locker rooms. It was like a Pee Wee tournament. Like I said, you got a different locker room every single day. And one day you might be in an auxiliary locker room that was small and down the hall. And then the next day you might be in the Edmonton Oilers main room where you get a lot of space and you get all the amenities that locker room has. And then there are other days where you're getting the NHL visitor room, where you have a pretty good sized room, but you just don't know. These rooms are constantly changing, and every inch of this arena was used for a different purpose. And the hallway or the loading dock could be an area where you end up using it for the gym. And you know, these guys are so used to having these big facilities with big weight rooms and running tracks and so many hot tub, cold tub, and all these different facilities that didn't exist, because you're trying to accommodate 12 teams in one space. So the reality is, there were days that this is all that a team would get for their workout space. And you can see they're held up with black curtains and they're right next to each other. And to have this, that's their gym. That's it. That's what you get for your gym. And it would rotate and move every single day. And as you're working out, somebody else is just getting done with practice or a game. It was, again, I can't tell you how much this is like a Pee-wee tournament, where you would just walk down the hallway and you can see here, there's Phil Kessel out in the hallway talking to the coach, Phil Housley. And then right next to him, there's Connor Murphy getting off the ice with the Chicago Blackhawks. Everybody was in the hallways. The hallways were jammed. Everybody, when you walk around, this is what it was like. You walk down and you can say, oh, the Edmonton Oilers are set up here. By the way, they didn't get their locker room the entirety of it. Like, it wasn't just theirs. They had to move just like everybody else. And you always had to go from room to room to room. So even the Arizona Coyotes were able to get dressed inside the Edmonton Oilers locker room at days. But you just walk down the hallway and this is it. It's just a mess. You go from the Edmonton stuff to the Arizona stuff. Oh, and there's the Edmonton Oil King room. Well, nope, today it's the Dallas Stars room. And the Dallas Stars are setting up in that room, but everything's out in the hallway. And you keep walking down the hallway, and I wonder what we're going to run into next down the hallway. You get to see the TV areas and what you could see behind the scenes. But nope, just like a Pee-wee tournament, it's some other team and somebody else is set up in another locker room. This is the Edmonton Oilers main room, and today it's the Chicago Blackhawks. And that was the one you wanted. You want to be in the big room, but if you couldn't be in the big room, you wanted to be in the visiting NHL room, because that was the other area that was mostly like what you're used to when you went into Edmonton, and you walk down here and you're out on the ice to try to play a game in the bubble. No stands, no fans, no people, and just try to get that excitement going for what's going on inside the bubble. Now, this is another area. Everybody had teams designated areas, and this was the area for video coaches, where each video coach got a designated suite where you could do your work inside. And you could see there's a game going on. Like, I'm behind a black curtain, so you couldn't see the ice, but that's one of your other designated areas. And this is what those spaces look like. And you just got to escape and be inside behind the curtain when the games were going on. You were sitting up in your little suite area working on video. And again, very much you felt that solitude being by yourself when all of the activity going on behind you, and you're just hidden in behind all of these working parts trying to get your work done. But this was the problem. And this, as a video guy and video guys that were in the bubble, this was hard. This is every day. This, you can see the tape. Those are the cords that run from the server to different computers. We had to move this stuff every time we practiced, every time we played. This room we might have for a few hours, and you have to pack it up and move again. I was on my knees running cables for this tournament day after day after day after day. And here we are set up in another room. This is what it's like in the NHL visitors room. So you got to pack up, move all the cables, move all the computers. This is the video coach's life. This is the actual NHL visiting room inside the Edmonton arena. But I want to show you what the equipment managers had to put up with every single day. Here's inside the Oil King room. And this is their life. Okay, we're going to move into the Edmonton Oil King room today. We're going to hang up. We're going to practice or play a game. And then as soon as this is over, we're going to pack our stuff up. We're going to move it down the hallway, and we're going to be in a different room. So every single day you're constantly around. There's the schedule. There's to show you how busy teams were on trying to keep track of where the heck they have to be. And I have to put a big shout out to Jay Verity, who put the shaving cream in his bag. And unfortunately, with that kind of movement, I don't blame the equipment guys. I blame Jay Verity for putting shaving cream in his bag and ruined everything. Way to go, Jay. But this is when you got the highlight, when you got to have the opportunity to be inside the Edmonton Oilers room. It was special, man. There is nothing else like what the Edmonton Oilers locker room looks like. Just a brief look. I don't want to take you the whole tour, but that thing is amazing, man. There is second to none in the National Hockey League on what's going on. And again, to take you back inside the arena and how well the NHL made this as a made-for-TV event, and their ability to make it. They had these screens that would show highlights of fans and their city, and it was a great job for TV. But this is where the staffs would watch the game. And so we had free access to this room all the time. So if you wanted to go, again, we talked like a Pee Wee tournament. This is the Arizona Coyotes staff coaches management suite. So if you wanted to watch a game, you had the ability to go watch any game anytime and just roll into your suite and hang out and watch the game. And I have to say, this is one of the signs. The wave is strictly prohibited. Clearly not a problem. Funny, but they started pumping in crowd noise to these games, and they didn't for the first few games. The exhibition games they did not, but as the playoffs started to continue, you started to hear the crowd noise, and I don't know who was running that. But I tell you what, when somebody got close to the net or close to the goal of the crowd, ooh, did a fantastic job. And I tell you what, made a difference. Made the game so much more fun to watch with that background noise. So hats off to whoever inside the league came up with, hey, maybe we should do this inside the arena, because it worked. It was awesome. But this is what it was like watching a game inside the bubble. You had access anytime to go watch any team, and every team in the league. You can see right next to us, that's the Minnesota Wild and their suite, and each team went down the row for their own suite, and you saw every game. These suites are full for management coaches, because honestly, there's nothing else to do inside the bubble. So we might as well go watch a hockey game. And again, this is what those look like. And I got to say, when the Hawks scored, this is what you would get. You had Hawks fans that were in front of their Zoom cameras sending shots in. It was amazing. Like the way they had the fans involved in this to make it feel like your fans were watching this, and they really had the ability to make this like yours. They did a great job. And this is the Coyotes getting ready for a game inside the arena. And again, we talk about how small some of these rooms were. This is an ancillary extra room that they had to prepare for a game for in a small space, man. Like, this is not what NHL players are accustomed to. This is what one of the star dressing rooms are. So this just showed how cramped and what it was like getting prepared for games inside that building. And I got to talk about something else. I know the sidebar for me, and I'm going to preach a little bit, but I went through a survey. And this is off my laptop, and I wanted to get every team to not wear suits. I made it my mission when the games were back on to get every team to not wear suits. I didn't think it was going to feel appropriate. I thought it was going to last a little hollow inside those buildings where no one was. And Talk was on board. Talk's like, let's do it. Let's do it. So here's a couple of the examples, and actually these were a couple of the outfits that the coaching staff wore on the bench during this tournament. You could see there were teams that weren't going to do it. Boston was going to not do it. Carolina, Columbus, like everybody was thinking, hey, maybe we won't wear a suit. Dude, everybody wore a suit. Everybody but the Arizona Coyotes. I got to give it to Rick Tocchet. He stood firm. He said, we're not doing it. Don't bring a suit. Do not pack a suit to the bubble. He held his ground, and he did not wear a suit inside the bubble. I didn't have a tie there. So hats off to Rick Tocchet. And I will say this, I still believe that this is the way the NHL should go. I do. And the reason I say it's two things. There's my little soapbox. It's cold on these benches, and you might not think it is, but you're standing that close to all that ice. It is cold, and coaches are uncomfortable. They have to go put on long sleeve shirts and long underwear underneath their suits just to feel comfortable. And it's ridiculous because you can look sharp like this, or like John Tortorella did, or secondarily, this is messy and dirty. Where your feet are, you got to think guys are spitting and sweating, and it's a mess. It's just filthy, disgustingly dirty. So why not allow them to dress like they do in the NBA? And why not allow them to dress like they do in the NFL? Okay, that was enough. That was off my soapbox. I had to say it because it's something that continually bothers me. But this is something I got to talk about, this painting. So when the bubble started, there was an artist inside the bubble that literally, you can see it's roped off. At the start of the bubble, he started painting this. And this was, you had no idea what he's doing, what's going on, but every day you'd pass him and he's sitting here working on this painting. And this is ultimately what the painting looked like. It was the captain from each of the 12 teams that were represented in this tournament, and it was phenomenal. And at last I was in Edmonton, it was still there. So I don't know if it's still in the lobby of Rogers in Edmonton, but at that time it was something that you could see when you walked in. Every time you got to get inside the Rogers, you could see that painting was in the lobby. So it was incredibly impressive, and I'm not sure whatever happened to that. So if somebody knows, throw it in the comments. But now we've been to the rink, you got to talk a little bit about the hockey. And I will say this, Arizona was in 11th place. Probably wasn't, they were not going to, let's face it, the Arizona Coyotes were not going to be in this playoffs. They had struggled. They had fallen off the map. They were first place at one time. Kemper gets hurt, pulls a groin. He misses all of it. And it's a mess. Like they slide right out of it. But again, you got that much time to prepare for one team and able to get through and beat the Nashville Predators. And I will say this, the Nashville came in 6th place, but Arizona wins this 3-1 in a 3-game series, and Arizona looked good. Like Arizona looked good, but buddy, they were not ready for what happened next. Now I do want to say one thing that happened after this, and one of the stories after the Coyotes advanced and beat the Nashville Predators and advanced to get the opportunity to play the Colorado Avalanche. And right after this, Rick Tocchet had an idea, and you've seen this with other teams where they had family members send in messages. You've seen it at the Olympics and stuff, where family members were able to send in messages, moms and dads and kids and wives, and congratulations and good luck. But I had 24 hours to get this done. And we're inside the bubble trying to come up with phone numbers to all these people's parents and family members. It was hard, no excuses, but there were 3 of us putting together these, and then you got to try to get somebody to film it on their phone, and you got to try to get somebody to get it to back to me so we could have these videos. And one of the things I still regret is that we didn't get every single player a message, and I still regret that I wish there was a way that we had the ability to get every player a message from their loved one, and we didn't. And I still feel bad about that, because what happened, we had a team meal before we played Colorado in the next round. I had a team meal in that space where I showed you inside the basement of the Sutton Place Hotel. And it started off, we turned on the lights, and the players had no idea. And it starts off with Jacob Chikrin's family and his mom and dad, and hey, Jacob, congratulations, we're all thinking of you. And then players started to be in awe, because it would go to somebody's kid, and then it would go to somebody's wife, and it would be just, we're cheering you on, we're thinking about you. And it was tough, because this is now well into the 20 some days, 3 weeks of not seeing your family. And I know, poor everybody, they didn't get to see their family, but consider, before this, they were with their family members 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every day for 4 months. That was, your life was with your family members all the time, and now you're not there, and you're not seeing them, you're not seeing your kids every single day, you're not getting to go through those things with your family members. And it was hard, and I tell you what, it got really emotional for some of the players inside that room. And there was a player that had a really hard time, and there was some concern, because it was emotional, and it was a player that unfortunately I didn't get a message from his family, and didn't get to see his family, and I feel terrible, because that person took it so hard, it missed their kids, and it was a real emotional time inside the bubble, where that player didn't get a chance to connect with his children, and I feel terrible about it. And that lingered for a while. And I think one of the things that did is you pulled that group together a little bit more during that everybody came to his aid, and you started to understand that it was more about the person and the people than it was about the hockey. So that person was able to move on after that night, and we all were able to bind together. But I'm sorry to that player, if you ever get a chance to watch it, that I didn't get an opportunity to get your kids involved. after the series with the Nashville Predators, things did not go as planned against the Colorado Avalanche. Hey, Colorado Avalanche was good. Like, it was a good hockey team, and they rolled the Coyotes. You look at the last two scores, they're 7-1, 7-1. It was more like a tennis score than it was a hockey score. If not for Darcy Kemper, this thing could have got even worse. So thanks to Darcy Kemper for keeping this one close. And that's the end of the hockey. So now it's time to get home and it's time to leave. And I tell you, everybody is exhausted. And one thing that happens inside the bubble too is when you lose, you get the hell out. Like, there was no, hey, you guys can linger around. This is the next morning. You lose, you're gone. Get the heck out of the bubble, because this, you got to think, this is going to stop 52 tests. This is going to save about 52 hotel rooms, all of this food. Like, get them out. Get everybody out of the bubble. And so that next day, you can see one of our medical guys, Donnie Fuller, exhausted. Like, you're just absolutely drained on your way home. And this is actually landing in Arizona, where we were finally getting back. Loading the plane up in Edmonton to get us back to Arizona. And I want to tell one more story before we wrap this up, because here's me on the plane, tired and ready to come home at the end of the bubble. But unbeknownst to me, that was my last experience in the National Hockey League. All of our contracts had expired in that summer at the end of 2020, and we always anticipated they get renewed, and sometimes they don't. And our contracts got revised at the bubble, and instead of taking us to a date like the end of the year, our contracts were very specific. Our contracts went 2 weeks following our final game. Well, our final game was a 7-0 loss to the Colorado Avalanche, and sure enough, 2 weeks later, I was told we are not renewing my contract with the Arizona Coyotes, and I was no longer the video coach of the Arizona Coyotes, and that was it. That was my last experience working for a National Hockey League team, was inside the bubble of 2020. And I will say this, I wasn't sure I was going to show this, but I am going to, because what happened next at my house after the bubble is, if you wanted to, the way home, if you wanted to get some Coyote merch, it was a really good time to swing by the Peters house, because there was a cleansing of my closet at the end of the bubble. And that's the way things looked at my house after. And I was able to purge some of my Coyote stuff. But that's it. That's a life and a look inside the bubble of 2020. And I tell you, it was a different time. And I will say this, I'm so glad that I got the opportunity to do that. And I hope you got a little feeling of what it was like. It was just different. It wasn't reality that you were living in for we were there for 27 days with the Arizona Coyotes. Can't imagine what happened with Tampa and Dallas as they went on for weeks beyond that and stayed there so much longer than we did, because it was quite an experience being inside the bubble. I hope you got a little glimpse and a little taste of what it was like to be inside the bubble in Edmonton back in 2020. And I just want to say thanks again as we're getting ready for another hockey season here inside the coach's room. And I thought we'd take a look back before we take a look forward. So thanks for taking the time with me. I'm Petey. This is Inside the Coach's Room, and we'll see you at the rink.